Alright, who here thinks the MAVIC AIR camera image quality is better than the MAVIC Pro? Raise your hand. And now, who thinks the image quality of the MAVIC Pro camera is better than the MAVIC AIR? Raise your hand. So what if I told you, in reality, there is a difference between the two cameras, but it's so minor that nobody would ever notice it? And finally, what if I told you that even though the differences are so minor between the two cameras, that the MAVIC Pro actually has a better camera and better image than the MAVIC AIR? Now, if you compare the specs of both drones, you'll see they both have the same half-inch camera sensor. And that camera sensor has been around all the way back to the year 2015 when DJI launched the Phantom 3 Pro. For some reason, it must be a really good sensor because DJI just keeps recycling it year after year after year. However, they do change the lens and they do change the processors and the firmware. The MAVIC AIR and the MAVIC Pro cameras both have the same ISO and maximum shutter speed range. So then, are both cameras exactly the same? Well, no. You see, they differ in their lens and the actual processors inside. Now, the MAVIC AIR's camera has a field of view, that's how wide it can see, of 85 degrees, which is really good. That's kind of like getting closer to wide angle, but it's not really wide angle. And it has an aperture of 2.8, which is pretty good for low light. And it only has one focus range, which is basically half a meter to infinity. Now, the field of view on the MAVIC Pro is 79 degrees, so that means it's not as wide as the MAVIC AIR. It's a little bit more narrow. However, it has a 2.2 aperture, which means it's pretty good in low light. And it also has a focus range of half a meter, but it has various steps in the focus range, which makes it a little bit more pro compared to the MAVIC AIR. Now, what about bitrate? The MAVIC AIR is supposed to have a really good bitrate for recording video, and it's true, it has 100 megabits per second recording capability. But once again, that only applies to video, not photo. On the other hand, the MAVIC Pro has a video bitrate of 60 megabits per second. A little bit less than the MAVIC AIR. Now, if you find the word bitrate confusing, think of it this way. It's just a way of saying, hey, the higher the bitrate, the more image data can be captured. Now, one slight bonus of a higher bitrate that I should mention is if you have some really good video editing software and you film in a high bitrate, well, then editing that video may allow you to maybe play with the colors and the dynamic range of the actual image that was recorded better than something that had a lower bitrate. Okay, so it sounds like I kind of like the higher bitrate on the MAVIC AIR. Then why am I saying I like the MAVIC Pro camera over the MAVIC AIR? Well, you see, my background is a photographer, so I have to really use the manual settings on a camera. Now, the MAVIC Pro has tons of manual settings. It even has a lens that has a manual focus, and the lens is actually sharper than that of the MAVIC AIR due to the manual focus. Not only that, it's attached to a drone which has a massive flight range, and it has a really good flight time, which means you spend more time in the air filming rather than coming down to the ground, changing batteries, and going back to filming. So now I'm going to show you the differences that a photographer would notice with these two cameras. Now, if you're not a photographer, trust me, if you're taking pictures with either the MAVIC AIR or the MAVIC Pro, you're not going to notice any difference between the two. If you're taking video with both, you're not going to notice any difference between the two. Trust me, they look identical unless you know what you're looking for. So here's what I did. I took this here chart, which is what I usually use to test most cameras, and it's just got a series of numbers, and of course you have your normal photography diagrams down here. I left it in black and white because since both sensors on both cameras are the same, if you snap a picture in DNG, which is RAW, the colors are identical. There's no difference whatsoever. It's only when you go to JPEG that DJI has tweaked the firmware slightly and the processor to give you maybe more saturated colors in one area and maybe less saturated in the other area. So by placing these images at multiple distances away from both drones, I could then snap photos in DNG, which is RAW, and then check out the quality of each photo. So here we go. The MAVIC Pro has an adjustable focus, which is extremely rare for a drone camera this size. Normally, it's found on a high-end drone camera. You can see here that you can blur the images to create an opening effect in your drone videos and then move the on-screen slider to move objects into focus. Or you can just tap on autofocus. As an example, here is a typical opening shot where I focused on the ground nearest to the drone with the MAVIC Pro so that when I took off, the image would be blurred and I could insert a title. For these examples, each photo was taken at a different distance, and for comparison's sake, I'm going to blow them up to 100 to 200%. The The MAVIC Pro and the MAVIC Air can just barely focus at the 6-inch distance, but anything beyond that 6-inch range is pretty much brought into tack sharp focus. However, the MAVIC Pro can provide a sharper focus than the MAVIC Air because you can actually select what you wish to focus on. Here I've set the object to focus on at a 2-foot distance. At this distance you can see that the MAVIC Pro's focus is sharp, and objects that are nearer than 2 feet and farther than 2 feet are slightly out of focus. Now when we compare that to the MAVIC Air, you can see that the MAVIC Air at 2 feet gives an adequate focus, and it's not bad. Now we move up to the 5-foot focus range. Again, the MAVIC Pro does a great job of focusing exactly at 5 feet, and everything is perfectly in focus, and objects that are nearer than 5 feet and farther than 5 feet are slightly out of focus. Now the MAVIC Air gives an adequate focus to all objects at this distance. Finally, here we have the MAVIC Pro focusing on an object that is 10 feet away. Now 10 feet for the MAVIC Pro is pretty much the infinity point, which means anything at 10 feet or beyond is always going to be in focus no matter where you select. Now the odd thing is that even at the 10-foot focus distance, you can see that the MAVIC Pro has a sharper focus than the MAVIC Air. Alright, and now a quick video comparison test between the MAVIC Air and the MAVIC Pro under the studio lights. Alright, let's switch to the view from the MAVIC Air, and here we go. There we go, MAVIC Air. You can see it's much more zoomed in on my face and the surrounding area because the field of view is much less than the camera I'm actually recording with. So how does it look? Do the colors look okay? Is the focus okay? There's lots of studio lighting, so everything should be perfect. How are objects behind me? Are they all in focus as well as I am? Everything around here in focus? Motion's good. All right, let's switch to the MAVIC Pro. And that is the MAVIC Pro. How do I look? Am I in focus? Colors okay behind me? Everything's good. How about the background? Is it a little bit out of focus and I should be perfectly in focus? Not really sure because the back is pretty close to me. Anyways, that's the image from the MAVIC Pro. And if you compare it to the MAVIC Air, I'm sure they both look quite similar. All right, so in summary, this is all about the cameras, not about the drones themselves, and as you can see, the differences are so minor you wouldn't even notice it. Whichever of these drones you own now or you choose in the future, they're both fantastic. And that brings me to the end of this video. So if you own both of these drones, post a comment below and tell me which drone you prefer for taking photos or video. Alright, I'll end this video here. If you enjoyed this one, hit that like button. Many more drone reviews and discussions on the way. Until next time, take care.